Good to see you. I'm Jane Vossler, and I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Community Senior Center. We're really lucky to have with us Sherry and Rich Larson. They were with us last year to do a travelogue on Ethiopia, and now they're going to share with us their trip to Newfoundland. So welcome, Sherry and Rich, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm Sherry, that's Rich. Rich will start us off, and then I'll do the second half.
There we go.
Okay, we'll turn it over to Rich. And if you can't hear us, please yell.
Okay.
So Sherry and I went to Newfoundland in August 2019, and we're going to take you through the pictures. Newfoundland is actually pretty far east. This is it on a map, and it's well to the east of the US and most of Canada. I'll show you a detailed picture soon. Okay, so this is sort of where we went, the red marks. We flew into Deer Lake, which is located here. And if I had been thinking more strategically, I would have flown out of St. John's, but we flew in and out of Deer Lake, which meant you got to drive all the way across Newfoundland 2 times. So I'm going to take you to the sort of the northeast part, Grossmourne National Park and Pointe-à-Choix, and then Sherry's going to take you up from there. So this is Grossmourne National Park, and this was what sort of brought us there. We wanted to do hiking there. And it's got a whole bunch of, it's got mountains. They're not real tall mountains. They're 2,500 feet, but it's got fjords, it's got mountains, and it's got very interesting geology. And so we went. One of the first places we went was a place called Green Point, which, okay, it's a nice little fishing village, but it has a geological site, and I'll give a 1-minute explanation of the geology of Newfoundland. It's extremely complex. Newfoundland, 600 million years ago, was lying at the edge of an ocean, shallow ocean, and some of the earliest life was living in this ocean. And it was depositing on the bottom as things died, and sediment went down to the bottom and forming rocks. And then basically this part of the world ran into Africa over the next couple 100 million years and pushed up seafloor containing, this is a group of fossils that are from the year like 485 million years ago to 500 million years ago. There's another famous site that's 565 million years old. And so there's a lot of interesting geological areas in Newfoundland. There's also an area where the Earth's crust ended up on top of, the Earth's mantle ended up on top of the crust, and we'll also go hiking there. So this is a place where there's just layers and layers. There's 30 million years of layered rock. And sometimes there would be landslides in the that would go down into the sea, and you'd end up with sort of a limestone layer, which is pretty interesting. But what's interesting really to the geologists is all the different fossils that are in the rock, because it's right across the Cambrian Ordovician boundary. But then it's a sort of a scenic main kind of place, a lighthouse. And this is one of the fjord kind of pieces of water. I think this is pronounced Bon Bay, but maybe it's pronounced Bonnie Bay. A lot of places in Newfoundland look like they have a French origin, but they've anglicized the pronunciations. Like Grossmourne is Grossmourne. So this is across the bay, and to the upper left there's a bread loaf size mountain, which is Grossmourne Mountain, which we're going to go hike on. But first we went on a hike into something called Green Gardens. And you're just in the boreal forest up here. Newfoundland is a giant boreal forest, and it's very lightly populated, for that matter, with bogs and spruce trees. We went down to the coast. The stairs to the coast were wiped out, but that didn't matter. We actually ran into some sheep here. And we did get down to the beach and go wandering along. This is a strange person down there. But then we also went and hiked the Tablelands, which is the area where the Earth's mantle is on top of the crust. And it's an area that doesn't really support much life. This is called serpentinite. It's a serpentine that's been weathered. It's very magnesium-rich rocks. And you end up with a lot of plants that eat insects. There's pitcher plants and sundews. And there's a third kind of plant that I never really understood. But we did take a ranger-led hike this first trip up into the Tablelands, which ended up here. It's a big bowl where you can go up to the end of the bowl and then up top, but we didn't have time that day. But we went back a different day and headed up the side a little bit earlier up to the top of the Tablelands. You can go across the top and come down the other trail, but you have to be able to orient. You need good weather, and we didn't have time. But there's asters growing in the rocks. More of the serpentinite. This is sort of up top in the Tablelands. And this is my wife with one of the fjord-like areas behind her. I think that's the Bond Bay.
Mhm.
And there's really not a trail up there, but you can tell where people have gone, excuse me. And just looking up at the top again. So the big hike we wanted to do there was at Grossmourne Mountain. And this is the map. You go through a very well-maintained trail up into a sort of a boggy area and then go up onto the mountain and back around the backside and down. And that's the trail. I'm not sure you can stay 6 feet away from other people these days. They do close it in May and June because of some of the ptarmigans nest, the caribou calve their young there, and somebody else, Arctic hare. So you can't go up there when they've got their young animals. It's just a view up the valley. Whoops. Our computer is sensitive. So this is the way you go up. There's a chute, and they don't want you coming down that chute unless you've got an emergency. The rangers tell you you have to go the other way. You have to go on across. Just because it's loose and you get people coming down and they start kicking rocks on the people going up. So we did head up. There was this other guy that was going about our speed. We ended up passing him multiple times, or he would pass us when we were resting. It's not really that loose, but it is a little bit loose. And then it's just a long ways up top. And we went across, I guess the whole hike is 10 miles, 16 kilometers. But we did make the summit. And the weather was pretty good. We didn't get rained on up top. And the trip down is really interesting. There's a lot of boardwalks and there's a lot of expansive views. You're certainly above tree line. This is one of the fjord-like areas that's now not a fjord because the land rebounded once the glaciers had gone. And so the fjords that had been carved in the rock now lifted up and they were blocked from exit to the ocean.
This was my favorite view of the whole trip. It was just so gorgeous.
And the whole highlands there it's a pretty constant level with a lot of valleys cut in it. And a lot of it's carved by the glaciers, of course. There were a couple kinds of ptarmigans. This is a rock ptarmigan. And more of the boardwalk. The boardwalks are great, but I know they're a real bear to maintain. And then there's waterfalls from tarns up high. And this is the willow ptarmigan. It's another kind of ptarmigan. And I don't know if we ever decided which kind of ptarmigan chick this was. It's a young of one of them. You remember?
A willow.
She says it's a willow. And there's the ptarmigan with the waterfalls in the background. So heading back down, it does get a little tiresome. I mean, it's interesting, but the trail's sort of rugged at this area. And this is me. So we were staying in Rocky Harbor, and one of the Newfoundland dinners is moose burgers or just moose steaks. Newfoundland didn't have any moose until around 1900, and I don't remember if they crossed the ice in a cold year or if they were introduced. But now they have about 100,000 moose, and hunting them is legal and eating them is legal, and people go do that. We did have a moose burger. We also had this thing called a Jig's dinner, which is everything that you had in your root cellar, plus an extremely salty piece of meat. And really, the meat is addictively salty, but the other stuff is sort of bland, I thought. Sherry didn't eat it. I ate one. One of the other places that everybody goes is Western Brook Pond, which is another one of these fjords that's now been raised, so it's not a fjord anymore. It has a small drainage area, which is shown in this map, and it's very deep. And so it takes like 17 years for water to flow through the semi-fjord area here. And of course, if they keep it clean, it stays very clean, but if it gets polluted, they got a problem. So they trying hard to keep it clean. We were fortunate, we got a decent day. We took the boat ride, and it's classic, glacial fjord. Waterfalls coming in the side. Waterfalls coming over the edge. And up at the top, you can take the boat up to the top as a hiker and get abandoned up there and hike out of the top on a route that takes you up to the highlands there, and then loop back over and end up going down near like Grossmourne Mountain, or you can come out along the side of this fjord. So there were some people that had gotten off. We didn't. We took the boat back out. But it's a very classic fjord view, and we had good weather. We hiked some in the forest, bunchberries, It's getting late in the year. The flowers are mostly gone. The northern green bog orchid. There were some birds. Sherry got a picture of a yellow warbler. Now, we also did another hike called Lookout Hills, which is above the ranger station in this part of the park, and you get a good lookout. And more pitcher plants, more views down into Bombay and just general Western Newfoundland views. And a lot of different places where there's sort of a natural resting area, they put these chairs. And there's really not that many hikers, so usually the chairs are empty, so we could sit down and rest, have lunch. Heading down among the pitcher plants. Just more of the same.
Tablelands.
Sherry's pointing out that the Tablelands are there. I think that's actually Grossmourne and Tablelands. Oh, that's all Tablelands, you're right. So we left Grossmourne and headed up to Pointe aux Choix, which is an area where it's a limestone peninsula that's been inhabited for about 6,000 years, and there's a lot of archaeological work going on there. But the caribou tend to be there, and there they were at the lighthouse. There, my wife points out the little baby one there. And we hiked around here. It's not really mountains. It's just trails. It's a very flat area. Again, some chairs to rest in. That's me having my Coke, or some bald-headed guy having a Coke, I guess. This is actually an area where they've been doing archaeological work there's been villages there for thousands of years. Various plants, Labrador tea, swamp laurel, the pink things, and black crowberries. And just looking back to the western mountains, the northern mountains, I guess they're called. So at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry. We're now at Pointe aux Choix, which is up here. She's going to take us north and then back south and east.
Okay. So Rich is interested in archaeology. So he was very interested in going to an archaeological site called Lonson Meadows. And it was a long drive. So it took a couple of days to get up there and then to get back, because that's really the only way. And then once we had gone there, we came back, and then we went back through Deer Lake and then took the Transcanada all the way over to Gandor, where we spent a night, and then headed over to the Avalon Peninsula, which is where most of the population lives, and the capital is there, St. John's. We saw a little bit of that. We went to an ecological reserve here, and then we went up to the Vista Peninsula because we had heard it was interesting, but I also have a friend and her husband who own a house there, so we wanted to see that area. Okay. So Rich mentioned that there were a lot of moose in Newfoundland, but at this point we'd been there, well over a week and had not seen one. But we knew that they had to be there because this barn had a lot of moose antlers. So we were hoping. And finally, we saw a moose. So that was a nice treat. So we got up to Lonson Meadows, and the sort of the common thought by the populace is that Leif Erikson came here. We don't know whether Leif came here, but we do know that there were Vikings that arrived on this spot.
He was there.
He was there. Rich thinks he was there. I guess enough people agree. So we went to Lonson Meadows, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and an 11th century Viking settlement was discovered here in the 1960s. I'll show you a little more and talk about that. So here is a map that was in the visitor center that shows where the Vikings traveled. And they believe that the Vikings came from Scandinavia and went first to Iceland and then traveled over to this area. And this is where Lonson Meadows is.
As a descendant of Danes, I object to the map because it appears to show that all the Vikings in England and Normandy came from Norway, and they actually came from Denmark.
And Rich is
The
Danish.
Vikings that went to Iceland and to Greenland and to the New World were from Norway.
Okay. So there were archaeological remains, and they reconstructed this house, and we were able to go in. They felt that that's what it looked like. And that was the inside. It was a long, great house. And
The walls were there.
the walls were,
The stone walls.
the stone walls were there. And at this site, they found nails. And there were not nails in the Native American population. So they dated these nails, and they believed that they originated in Europe about the era that the Vikings were there. So there is pretty much good consensus among archaeologists that this was a temporarily inhabited place by the Vikings. And there's my Viking. So, as I said, we did make our way all across the Newfoundland and ended up in St. John's, the capital. And one of the first places we visited was a wonderful, wonderful museum. And I recommend people going there. There's a lot of history and other good information. And there's a wonderful view of St. John's Harbor from an upper floor of that museum. St. John's is kind of a hilly place, and the museum's on the top of the hill. So we're going to go from here over to this area and do some hiking. But first, this is the downtown. I took a picture. I wanted some of the main street, and there was this amazing car there, so had to get that in the picture.
The Mustang sound.
I don't know. And then near the downtown, it's a beautiful neighborhood where people have painted their houses different colors. So now we're at Signal Hill National Historic Site. And in the back, the tower over here is where Marconi received his first transatlantic wireless signal. So there's a museum there. What we've done is sort of walk over up here, and then we go around and then come back along this area. So there are cannons because during World War II, the Germans got very close to this area, and they wanted to protect the harbor. This is looking back at St. John's. And then, surprise, surprise, we were sitting in these chairs and watching as some people came up. And these are the people that we were going to visit in another few days. And we didn't know that they were in St. John's. So we just did a double take. And I took their picture, and they took ours. So then we're heading back along down by the bay. There are lots of lighthouses in Newfoundland. You can see one across the bay. And then it does get kind of foggy, but you can see the stairway on the right that we walked along. It was very pretty. Another day, we went to visit this lighthouse. It's the oldest surviving lighthouse in Newfoundland. And you see the pink chairs there again. Okay. I'm sorry, it just wasn't clicking. Okay. Here is one more. That's the lighthouse at a distance, or actually that's the new lighthouse, the replacement. Here are gun batteries that were built during World War II. We went inside. And this is the marker that marks the most easterly point in all of North America, is at Cape Spear. This is also at the beginning of what's called the Transcanada Trail. It's not a trail the whole way, it's sort of like a route. But if you want to walk 15,000 miles, this is where you begin to make it your way across to the Pacific. We used this book, Hikes of Eastern Newfoundland. It showed where the various hikes were. There's a whole system of East Coast Trail, and we just did a few little pieces. This is Signal Hill, where we were, and then we're going to go to Babels and do some hikes around there. So we're back at Cape Spear, and so here is an East Coast Trail sign. They do have the same philosophy as in the US about leave no trace. We're heading to Blackhead. Pretty views. Here again, there are boardwalks walking through sort of wetlands. It was very lovely. Not super sunny, but walking through ferns. Hooded ladies' dresses. And this is an old fort. And now we're down in Babels, and we had a gorgeous day and made reservations to take a boat ride. We wanted to go to an area where there were a lot of birds. So, beautiful coastline. Saw a bald eagle. And a couple of minke whales. They're really hard to get a picture of. That's Rich's picture. All the rest are mine. And this is Whittles Bay Ecological Reserve. It's an island, and the birds hang out here. All these specks over here are birds, and the birds everywhere. And my favorite birds, Atlantic puffins. They had nests, holes in the grass. And here are some puffins swimming. The boat was kind of rocky, so it was hard to get a picture of birds on the water or on land, but got a few. On the left is a blackback gull, great blackback gull, and then a herring gull on the right. These are black-legged kittiwakes on nests. And all of those are murres. They're just everywhere. And here you see a close-up of them, one with a fish. And then we had some excitement. An eagle decided to fly in. It was looking for a meal, baby birds. And other birds try to fly off or even attack that eagle because they don't want their babies taken away. So there's sort of like a diversion. They're flying around. And here you actually had a herring gull trying to attack the eagle. It's not a great picture, but you get the idea. Okay, why is it's not clicking? Okay, we're taking another hike around Babels. There's really good signage. Without two cars, it's hard to do a through hike. So we just did out and back. But we're walking in an area sort of, that bay right there is where our boat ride had been. And then walking along the cliffs, it was just lovely. And wild blueberries everywhere. Another path that we took was beaches. This was a little more gray day, but still pretty. The rocky coast. Wildflowers along the way, wild smooth rose. Okay, and now we've left Bay Bowls and we've gone south to Cape St. Mary's Ecological Reserve. And this is for more birding. All of these are northern gannets. We'd seen northern gannets before when we went to Gaspé Peninsula, but there were lots here too. And they're fascinating to watch because when they land, they want to they greet their partner and like a French kiss with their beaks. And you can see some young birds, various different sizes. They're still down instead of feathers. That's what they look like flying. And here, this gannet has, sort of plopped on top of its mate, and then there they do the French kiss thing. Okay, the last area we went to is the Vista Peninsula. There are several larger towns here. The area where our friends live is here, just a small little village. The bigger cities are Bonavista, Elliston. We went to Elliston, and then we also went to Trinity. This is a very popular trail in the Trinity area, the Skirwink Trail. It's along the coast, very rocky. And then it goes through, I don't know what kind of trees they are, but it's kind of weird to walk through those. And here you see a black sand beach. We did see a common loon in the water. And then this is looking across the bay towards the city of Trinity. More flowers. Very scenic hike. It was a foggy day here. This is historic Trinity. There are a number of lodging establishments here. And then this is an old church, St. Paul's Anglican, that is quite old and colorfully painted. This is our friend who lives in the village of Open Hall. It's a 130-year-old house. I think that had 6 or 8 family members when they bought it. A small house, it's hard to imagine 6 or 8, but these friends live in Vermont in the winter, but also own this home in Newfoundland. Unfortunately, because of COVID, they weren't able to get there the summer of 2020. They did go for a very little bit once the border was open this year. And that's the view from their home. And they have wonderful views of icebergs and whales, and it's just lovely. So there are lots of little hikes on Bonavista Peninsula. We did this Lighthouse Trail. That's the 1893 lighthouse. Double-crested cormorants. And then more interesting geology, the layers of rock and the red rock, 600 million years old, some of it. And there you can see more of the red rock. Flowers along the trail, turtle heads, and reindeer moss. And here is the Klondike Trail. Had a nice day. Beautiful views of, all the rock. That was an interesting spear. Waves crashing. And then I like this picture. It was a wood pile in Elliston. And they call themselves the root cellar capital of the world. There are a number of old root cellars, and they've made an effort to preserve them. We did not go in any of them. And then another place that I really enjoyed was in this town of Elliston. And there's a little island right near the coast where Atlantic puffins nest. And, I had a telephoto lens, so I was able to get some photos. You can see all the holes where they've nested. There is one just about ready to take off. And there are a couple others. I wish they were closer so I could have gotten sharper pictures, but it was fun. That one's about to land. And then this little guy decided to come over to the mainland, just very near to where we were. It was a cliff edge. Couldn't get too close for fear of falling off the cliff. But look at the web feet and the nails. Just everything about the face is so cute. So he's saying, hope you can visit Newfoundland. So I thought maybe you'd be interested in some facts about Newfoundland. I think I may have just mispronounced it.
No.
Okay, Newfoundland.
Well, it's not Newfoundland, it's Newfoundland.
Newfoundland. Not Newfoundland. It's part of the province of Newfoundland and I'm getting tongue-tied. It's a province that includes Labrador. 94% of the population of the province is in Newfoundland, and about half is in St. John's. As we mentioned, it's an island, and you get there by land or sea. There are 2 ferry crossings from
I think you might just say by air or by sea.
Yeah. Okay.
There's no bridges.
Yeah. So the sea crossings, they're 2 big ferries that come from Nova Scotia. And during the summer months, when most of the tourists visit, you need to have a reservation in advance. And sometimes because of the weather, they're canceled. So you need to allow for that in your trip planning. The population of Newfoundland is a little less than Vermont. Its size is quite large. It's larger than the whole size of Maine. And the weirdest thing is that Newfoundland and Labrador have their own time zone, like a half hour ahead of Atlantic time. And so 90 minutes ahead of us. So if you have a ferry to catch on the return, you got to make sure you got it right. So as we mentioned, the Vikings did discover, in quotes, North America. And the oldest city in North America is St. John's. It was founded by John Cabot. So now we'll be open to questions.
I'll throw in an editorial comment that you could claim that the Siberians discovered North America when they came across the Bering Straits 15,000 years ago. I'm just being difficult with that.
Someone put a question in the queue about, did you see any ticks when you were hiking?
Any ticks?
Ticks? No,
No, I don't know that they have them. It might be too cold up there.
that would be nice.
They all freeze to death in the winter. I don't know, but we never saw any reference to worry about ticks or wear your repellent or anything like that.
Are there any other questions? Kathy?
How long was your trip? How many days were you gone?
We went for 3 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 3.5. I forget exactly. We drove to Montreal,
Okay.
flew from Montreal to Deer Lake, and back from Deer Lake to Montreal. You have to fly through Halifax, and we could have flown from Montreal direct to probably to Gander or to St. John, but for some we originally constructed it to go to Grossmourne, and so we fixated on Deer Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably shouldn't have. I probably should have thought more globally, but I didn't.
And we really needed that amount of time. I guess we could have omitted the long drive. I think it was 3 days we spent going up to Lonson Meadows. But if you have a shorter amount of time, it's best to probably pick East or West Coast, because there's a lot to do on both. But we really enjoyed what we did, and there was lots more that we could have done if we'd had more time.
If you don't have Scandinavian forebears, you might not want to go to Lonson Meadows.
Yeah. And we were there on the most dreary day of our whole trip. So
I would just say we went to Lonson Meadows, and I think it was worth it.
okay.
I don't have any Scandinavian.
And
Okay.
there was work just completed in the last, it was published in the last few months, that the trees that were used in the construction of the buildings at Lonson Meadow were chopped down in 1021. They had always said around the year 1000, but they weren't sure exactly when. But the dating now on those trees says 1021. So that's when they're saying that it was founded. It was built and then abandoned about 10 years later.
Another vote for it. We thought it was very interesting too.
Oh, okay, good. My view might have been different if it hadn't been pouring rain and cold that day.
I mean, there were interesting places. We did hiking up there. We went to some they call them limestone barrens, where there's interesting plants, and of course, nobody lives on them, so they're now parks, and you can hike there. It was interesting enough.
But I think if I was going for the first time, if you're interested in hiking and hiking peaks, Grossmourne is really wonderful. More trails along the waterfront, the East Coast is really nice too. And there are more places to visit, more museums, art galleries, but we did what we could squeeze in 3.5 weeks.
Any other questions?
Oh, when were we there?
We were there in August of 2019, and I saw a note about were there mosquitoes. We didn't run into mosquitoes, although I keep getting told that if you come earlier in the year, there's more birds. You might catch icebergs floating down north of Newfoundland, and you will catch mosquitoes. I think the mosquitoes are sort of a July kind of thing.
Or June. Yeah, we had heard a lot about the mosquitoes, and so that's why we planned August. But in the tail end of August and into September, a few of the tourist areas had started to close. So you need to figure out if you're really into birding, maybe earlier. I think for general tourism, perhaps mid-July through the end of August is the time to go.
And everybody says we had reservations for every night because we don't camp. We stay in motels, but what we were hearing was that everybody that camps, and there's a lot of people that do that, you got to have reservations for your campgrounds too. It has no winter season, so all the tourism is in the summer, and so there's not extensive year-round facilities, and so when summer comes, they get taken.
And sort of like Vermont, our big tourist season is summer and in the fall, and so things during that time. So hotel prices are kind of high. They try to make their revenue then, and the same thing happens in Newfoundland.
But it's not as bad as Iceland.
No, that's true.
Any other questions? I guess you told us everything, and you had the most beautiful photos, really.
Thank you. Someone just raised their hand.
I don't see it, but go ahead, whoever you are.
We saw a question flash on our screen and then it went away.
Okay.
Oh, someone said, are there any wolves or other predator species that you know of?
I don't think there's any wolves. I don't remember hearing about them. If they were probably hunted to extinction along with the original moose before the moose came back. So I don't think so, but we certainly never worried about any. The other thing that's interesting is you get to meet the boreal forest up close and personal. The whole island is, the spruce forest with limestone barrens and with various wet areas in it. And of course, it's a very little population. So if you drive from east to west, you have to take a lot of coffee with you because there's not many places to stop, and it gets repetitive. It's hundreds of miles across from Deer Lake over to I think it's over 100 miles from Deer Lake to Gander, and there's almost nothing in between. It's just forest. Well, I guess if there's no more questions, you'll thank everybody for coming and listening.
Thank you so much for sharing your trip with us.
Okay. You're welcome.
Okay, we'll say goodbye to everybody.
Bye.